Are there any exemptions to auctioneers needing to have an auctioneer's license? And we find out, yes, there are a few occasions in which you can conduct an auction without having an auctioneer's license, and there's some types of auctions that are not governed by the North Carolina Auctioneer Licensing Board. Some examples of those are sales conducted by the owner of all the goods or the real estate that's being offered, or an attorney that's representing the owner, unless the owner's regular course of business includes engaging in the act of auctioning real or personal property. A good example of this that a former executive director, Bob Hamilton, used to use was that the person collected Beanie Babies and finally got tired of them, so they were their Beanie Babies, so they decided to have an auction. They did have an auction. It was their own goods, so they were exempt from auction law for one time, and it did really, really well. Well, that got them to thinking, so they started going to yard sales and flea markets and buying other Beanie Babies, and decided to have a second auction. Now, at this point, they need an auction license. The first example, it was their goods and they were selling them and they were the sole owner. In the second scenario, they had gone out and solicited, had purchased items for the sole purpose of selling them at auction. So the exemption no longer relates to them. Some other examples that are exempt is anything that's done under the direction of the law or a public authority, where they're saying you will have an auction. You'll see this in terms of bankruptcy. Well, let's don't go with that one. That's not a real good example. But a court-ordered sale might require you to do that. Trustees, guardians, administrators, executors, those type auctions are exempt. Also, a person conducting a sale that is part of a United States bankruptcy court. It's where we mentioned a while ago. The bankruptcy court has some additional rules over their auctions that apply to the agent and the attorney. Another exemption might be sale of livestock. Now, we'll have a slide later on about that, but one of the things you need to remember, the reason that a public livestock market doesn't need an auctioneer's license is because they are regulated by the Commissioner of Agriculture. So they have another board authority that's over them and authorizing their actions. Leaf tobacco sales that are under Chapter 106 of the General Statutes are exempt. Currently, tobacco auctions are almost exempt. They're doing more online and things like that, or allotments, but leaf tobacco sales are exempt. There are exemptions for automobile auctions. The ones that are conducted under GS 20-70 or sale at auction of motor vehicles by a motor vehicle dealer that's licensed under a different statute, which is actually Article 12, Chapter 20. You probably don't need to know that. You just need to understand that automobile dealer auctions are exempt because they are regulated by other boards. There are certain kinds of livestock that is exempt because that's covered under the Packers and Stockyards Act, and the auctioneer is required to be bonded by the United States Department of Agriculture. So different regulating boards. Now, we need to be very careful on the livestock. You can be exempt from having an auctioneer's license under those conditions for the livestock, but not for selling tack. So if you're selling feed, fencing, bridles, saddles, saddle soap, any of those things before you sell the livestock, you do need an auctioneer's license. We give a benefit to charities and religious organizations. They can be exempt. Civic clubs have an exemption up to a point. If a civic club has one auction a year, that's fine. If they go more than that, then they appear to be in the auction business and they may need a license, or at least a firm license. If you look in your book, you'll see all the other exemptions, but these are just some of the ones that are most recognizable and cause the most questions. There are also issues about warehouseman's liens, bulk sales, those type things that come under different statutes. And of course, the Uniform Commercial Code that applies to auctions and what is involved in that. Everything has exemptions, so we encourage you to read page 2 over and over again. Make sure you understand who and is required to have an auctioneer's license and who is exempt. Just a quick review. Tobacco auctions, automobile auctions, carriers or warehouse liens. That's where your storage bin auctions come into play. Bulk sales, rejected goods, and a reminder that civic clubs are not to exceed one auction per year. As you review this one, Packers and Stockyard Act, Livestock Trade Association, Commissioners of Agriculture. These are all the reasons that livestock auctioneers do not always have to have a North Carolina auctioneer license, even though most of them do. Don't forget, what is tack? That's anything that's not walking and breathing, and you cannot sell those without an auction.